What's going on, Packers fans? Aaron Nagler here, along with Bill Schmid from 97.3 The Game, Cheesehead TV, coming to you with the Carry the G Radio, the podcast. I love saying that. I don't know why I love saying it. I just love saying it. How the hell are you, man?
I love it. I think we're going to start calling the radio show the podcast too next year. It's the Carry the G Radio Show podcast.
The podcast radio show.
Hey, we're carrying it 365, baby. So we got to do it however they want it.
However you want it delivered, whether it's audio, video, because look, Billy with his backwards hat, clearly proudly displaying Packers there across his forehead. I got the old school logo going on. We're
a great one.
We try to dress up for you folks here at Cheesehead TV.
Oh, come on now, Nags. I brought out the special one. Where is it over here?
Oh, there you go. Look at you.
Little
Super Bowl
31. Come on now.
Go.
You got to find those clearance racks here.
There's a vintage clothing store here in Manhattan, downtown, that has tons of old school NFL gear, and they have a bunch of Super Bowl 31 stuff. It's awesome.
Oh, that's outstanding.
Highly recommended if you're ever in town. I'll point you in the right direction.
Listen, I'm down to have you as the tour guide because
that's why I'm here, man. That's why I'm here. So the NFL today, I want to start on the NFL tip because the league meetings kick off next week, and the competition committee has a bunch of proposals, as well as some team-driven proposals. But two of the ones that I think are the most fascinating, or the most beguiling, or the most frustrating, take your pick, are a couple. One rule change proposal deals with the kickoff, and let me tell you, it's a doozy, man. This is serious kind of revamping of a play that had been kind of dwindling, right, over the course of the last, let's say, decade, and how much we've heard about how it's the most dangerous play in football. And we know they've been tinkering with it, that they banned wedges, and then there were, you could fair catch last year, etc., within the field of play. And now they have gone, holy Toledo, let me tell you, this is pretty extreme. All right, so let me just lay this out for you. I want to get your response and your idea of how this might transpire, if it is. Now, this is not set. This is a proposal, right? They're going to vote on it next week. But this is the proposal. The kicker would continue to kick from the 35-yard line, but the other 10 players on his team would line up at the receiving team's 40-yard line. At least 9 members of the return team would line up in a setup, what's called a setup zone, between the 35 and 30-yard line. So they're essentially like 10 yards apart, right?
Red Rover style, 10 yards apart.
Up to 2 returners can line up in a landing zone between the goal line and the 20-yard line. No one other than the kicker and the returner can move until the ball hits the ground or a player inside the landing zone catches it, right? Touchbacks would be marked at the 35-yard line, and no fair catches would be allowed. Say what?
So there's a lot of layers to it, right?
Right?
So Sam Schwartzen is one of the first guys that was the rules expert, was the rules guy for the XFL when they first came up with this.
Which this is based off of, right?
Yep,
this is a tweaked version of that.
Because I think the XFL was 35, 30-yard line. They were only 5 yards apart.
Yep.
I love the touchback part of it. I love changing the touchback to the point of, if you're not going to do it, it's going to be like kicking the ball out of bounds. And it's a serious penalty to keep it inside the landing zone. I think it adds an amount of strategy for the kicking game.
Yes.
That is welcomed. And it also doesn't kill one of the more exhilarating plays in the game. It takes away what has now been a bathroom break, right? Because you're probably going to get a kickoff.
You got a kickoff. You're going to have a down. You're going to go back to commercial. Yeah.
I was going to say we might have back-to-back commercials depending on where they're stacked up in the clock.
Commercial kickoff commercial. It's a long-standing tradition with the NFL.
At least there gives you a reason to be watching while it happens. I think, Nags, this is the last-ditch effort to try to keep the play
in the game.
And they understand how much on life support it is, because the optics are terrible. I don't know the splits, off the top of my head, of the percentages of players that do get hurt and the higher rate, elevated risk rate of concussions when you're running down 65, 70 yards.
I mean, years ago, it was significant. Now, in the recent kind of vintage, the last kind of 5 years or so, it has noticeably noticeably dipped. However, it's somewhat plateaued, in the
Yes.
sense that, it's helped what they've done, but those plays that actually do kind of get, the returner actually makes an attempt. Yeah, people are still getting hurt. There's
Yeah,
no doubt.
people are still getting hurt. So I struggle to just logistically think of how it works with you catching the football, and that's when everyone
People can
goes,
move.
right? Like,
Yes,
are we going to
that's
call false
insane.
starts? That's the part that I don't love.
Oh, of course. That's the other problem, right? Or not. I don't even know if I want to call it a problem, but it's a certainly a part of the gig. That's a certain part of this rule that is going to have to be adjudicated very carefully. The whole idea is you want to limit their pre-catch movement
Right.
to kind of cut down or eliminate these running starts and these insane collisions. Like, that's the whole, idea behind the rule proposal, which I'm down with. I do wonder, like, I'm fascinated to see how this changes roster construction, and if this plays into some of the reasoning behind giving Keisean Nixon the deal they gave him. Although we got the details today, and it's essentially what I suspected. It's 1 year, and then easily they can move on if they so
Packers
choose.
years.
Yeah, exactly. It's a choice for the Packers as far as, okay, there's a bonus due on the fifth or third day of the league year. We can move on if we want to. But I'm telling you, you got a guy like Keisean back there who's already never calling for a fair catch. Now you can't call for a fair catch, and you got to go. Keisean's been doing that for years.
Yes.
So
He
I
was
think
going to
he's
take it.
ready for this.
The other part that I think is going to be intriguing, this is my grand plan of how at some point within the next
Commissioner
25
Billy Schmid,
years, right?
Right.
The new thing in pro football will be down the field laterals, right? Moving the ball out of your hands in play, not simply behind the line of scrimmage. This opens up creativity in special teams rooms that, I mean, you're going to see balls thrown across the field. You're going to see
a little
some
mile high
razzle-dazzle.
miracle action. I'm down with it.
Yeah. You're also going to see, and this is why this is getting pushed as much as possible. Special teams coordinators keep their jobs because otherwise, right? Like,
what the hell are you doing out there, right?
Hey, 10, 15 years ago, linebackers coaches did punt, right? Like, you could very well have my punt return guy is also our assistant defensive backs coach, and you eliminate a spot. They don't want that. They want to be able to try to keep this as much a part of the game as possible. And I love it. I love at least, and this is the other part of why I like it, is it's acknowledging the fact that the XFL had something correct, right?
To
like,
offer.
okay,
Yeah, 100%.
It had something
Like, we laugh about the
Let's
XFL, but yes, 100%. There was definitely like some real ingenuity going on in that league, both kind of iterations, right?
No doubt.
I will say, now, all of that said, we've talked about it now for a good, 8 minutes. Do you think that has any chance in hell in passing? Because I love the idea, and I know you're on board with it. But man, we are not NFL owners who are notoriously slow to change. It is a 1-year proposal, right? It only it wouldn't become a permanent rule. It would be, let's do it for 1 year and see kind of how the Packers are signing Keisean Nixon. So I think that gives it a chance. But man, I don't know. There are a lot of old head owners who I think are going to take some convincing.
Yeah, there are a lot of stubborn dudes, right? The Maras are still in that building, right? Like, I mean, like, it's still going to be one of those where you have to convince a certain amount of people. But I think there's so much backing with the coaching staffs of it that I think it's got a pretty good chance of passing. And they do it for the 1 year. Hell, they've tried changing and tweaking the rule 4 times in the last 8 years. So I think they're open to at least trying it, because
doing something for a year and then
makes sense. Why not?
Regrouping. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I worry that, it's such a drastic change, or it would
your logic is
such
not
a drastic change. You know what I mean? Like,
right. Because your logic's not flawed by thinking
it's not
NFL
a league
owners,
that does big swings like that. They try to do little things, and this would be,
especially if it's not their idea.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing, right? Although, who knows? Because it's coming out of the competition committee, it could feel like an extension of the league and the owners, and rather than a team putting it forth, maybe that gives it a chance. There were several rule changes. I'm not going to go through all of them. The other one that, of course, caught my eye, and I talked about it a little bit on Twitter, was the potential elimination of the hip drop tackle. Why did this become the boogeyman in the last few years? Like, this is something guys have been doing forever. And now all of a sudden, because a few dudes got hurt, and yes, dudes do get hurt, like all of a sudden, this idea where a guy is usually sometimes from the side, but often from behind, wrapping up and dropping and like losing his kind of footing on purpose to use his full weight to bring a ball carrier to the ground. Like, yes, that's called football. It's called tackling. You have to get them on the ground anyway, by any means necessary. But now all of a sudden, because yes, a few dudes got hurt, it is enemy number one, apparently, in the game of football. And I think there's a real legit chance that this thing passes. And I understand the idea of wanting to keep guys safe while you try to drum up an 18th game NFL. That's adorable. But, at some point, defenders have to be given a chance when they're running full speed and having to make these determinations with split-second timing. And it's like you've already made it impossible to hit the quarterback. You've already made it impossible to guard guys past the 5 yards downfield because you're not allowed to even touch them without getting some ridiculous pass interference, defensive holding penalty, depending on which crew you have. And there's no consistency. So God help you. But now you're also going to tell them, it depends on your angle. Don't drop your weight too much. You're gonna get a flag. And that's the other component, is these officials having to adjudicate this in real time. Are we crazy? Yeah. Are we absolutely? Do we want to make things unwatchable? Because it feels like it will be.
Why not make it easier? Why not make it easier on the officials and not add another thing that you have to think about and look for?
Yes.
Another layer of subjectivity. Like, yes. I understand that there are some pretty clear criteria that, at least it appears on paper, show you what is what isn't a hip drop tackle. But Nags, I've been watching football for 20 years. I could barely tell you which one it is, right? Like,
and I can point to clear, concise language about what a catch is, and we spend every freaking Sunday debating that.
Yeah, and that's like the Supreme Court definition of pornography. I'll know it when I see it. I still don't know it, and I see it all the time. I struggle with this part of it. At some point, you're trying to make it safer and safer for the offense. You're making it unsafe for the defense, right? You're making it quite unsafe for defensive players when what you're saying is the only way that you can take somebody down is by lunging out through their legs, where a knee hits the side of your head, and that can be a 3-week concussion.
And how many times do we see that this year?
Right. So I mean, like, I understand that we want our fantasy football players to stay on the field, right? Because it's Tony Pollard, Mark Andrews, money-making guys on the offensive side.
Guys who have the ball in their hands.
Yeah, and I get it. However, you're making it so difficult and now more and more dangerous, at least I believe at some point, inherently more dangerous for the defensive players. You got to think of their side of it at some point. It is going to be a violent game that is going to have injuries that at some particular point you're not going to be able to. You can't
legislate it out of the game, right? And there's going to be, to your point, there are already, we've kind of seen with dudes trying to like hold up on the quarterback or whatever, who end up getting hurt because you're thinking so much and you're not reacting. You're not going to them. You're not like just rising and firing off the ball because you've got a million things going on about where you can hit, where you can't hit, how you're supposed to tackle, how you're supposed to do a block. And all these things have people thinking so much. And it's like, that's the players. And then you float it over to the officials. How many layers are we going to put of responsibility on these men who, by the way, aren't doing a bang up job as it is?
Right. Already struggle week in and week out. I mean, and are not in your building, right? Like, and also go for 3 to 4 days to go to another job.
Yeah.
So I understand that this one is probably going to pass because the league wants it. The league wants it to pass. So it's going to pass.
They've been beating this drum for a while. Yeah.
I wonder how long it lasts, right? Like, I think this one has a better chance of being reviewable pass interference than horse collar tackle, which has never gone, or roughing the passer, which continues to get more and more legislated.
Yeah, and who knows? Like, it's funny you mentioned the reviewable pass interference because I mean that just died on the vine because the guys refused to use it. They just refused to call it. Remember, like when they were, kind of adjudicating it that one season, and there were so many times you're like, is this not going to get reviewed? Like they can review this, and they just didn't do it. Like I got to think if this is something they feel is just an overreach. Although The word is the officials think they can officiate it because, of course, they do.
Yeah,
but it's like, I don't know. I just find it kind of impossible that this is going to be something that's going to be a boon to the game, or it's going to be an asset or an add-on to the game. The only
I don't
thing
think it's going to impact it that much.
And potentially, like, I don't know, ruining a game or two. That's what I think is the end game here.
It's tough because you consistently think of what they've done to stack against the defense.
Right.
This one is just one more way of, and I also don't see malicious intent in the hip drop, right? Like when you watch
somebody like that hit that Musgrave took in Denver this year, right? With a safety helmet to helmet hit, blah, blah, blah. I understand wanting to legislate that type of hit out of the game. To your point, intent. I get it.
I also understand the horse collar.
He's just trying to get a dude on the ground. Oh, dude,
yes.
Don't get me started. Yes.
But horse collar to me is a lazy attempt of getting somebody on the ground if I grab him by the throat and just pull him down. This is I'm trying to do whatever I can.
Using all weight, all my power,
force as this guy's
my
on
whole
the
body
side
to get somebody.
And you know what? I've been trying to hip drop tackle my friends from running around and telling the parent when we were 9 or 10 years old what happened in the basement. You try to pull somebody back with all your weight. It's
stop that.
You know, man, I just don't get it. I understand they want more offense, but this one I think is going to be too damaging to the defense to hold up for too long.
It's just every week I'm like, how do you even play defense in this league? Every week I'm looking at defensive backs in particular and thinking how impossible their gig is. And this just adds another layer to it. And I hate it.
Yeah, I don't love it. The couple that I thought were interesting, I like the ability to challenge a third time if you've won a challenge.
If you won one challenge, right?
If you've won one challenge, you get another opportunity. I think that makes a lot of sense.
For the third, you get a third opportunity.
Yeah, for the third one.
I don't know. I wish we'd make the jump, and this is what I'm talking about when I say the owners don't like going like all in right away or pushing the envelope too much, etc. Just make everything reviewable and give yourself 2 challenges in the game, and that's it. Like Bill Belichick's been talking about this for years. Like everyone complains that it'll slow the game down too much, and it's like, have you watched NFL football? We are there. We're already slow. Like the game is such a fits and starts kind of operation that it's like, no, like yes, there are challenges. Each team gets 2. I got no problem with like they want to challenge anything on the field. They should be able to do so.
Yeah, and like the shot clock style play clock that they've also kind of thrown out here of, hey, when it hits 0, the light goes off, and you know that ball's not snapped.
Delay a game.
And it's a delay of game.
As opposed to this at the official's discretion, depending on where he's looking. Are we kidding right now?
No. There's too many plays, in my estimation, in this game that are judgment calls. Why make something that is arbitrary, was clear, not a play, not a call?
When are we going to get chips in the ball? That's what I want to know. I mean, they already have chips in the shoulder pads. Why don't we have chips in the ball yet? You know, like, can we get to the point where the football touches the end zone or crosses a plane and then there's just an automatic boop and touchdown? We don't have to sit there for 20 minutes.
Pretty simple.
Like, we need, like, these are the things that seem so easy, such easy fixes. Like, but we still got dudes with chains running up and down the sideline. I don't know. Trying to figure out what a first.
Oh, it's the human aspect of the game.
Yeah, that's it. The human aspect.
That's the part of it.
Oh man, speaking of the human aspect, did you see the plans? I don't know. I just thought of this, and I'm sorry I didn't give you a heads up on this. But did you see the plans for the new kind of end zone areas down in Arizona?
I did.
Where they have like the cabanas or whatever. Like,
oh yeah,
what has happened to the game I love, man? Like, what you talk about the human element? Like, imagine sitting in that thing, and by the way, there's a football game going on. Like,
it's over this way.
What are we doing
now
in this life, man?
Yeah, that one is a little bit different than the Vegas style nightclub in the end zone. Because when I was out in out in Las Vegas, that looks like a pretty sweet way to watch a game. Cabana with the depth of it, that I don't know.
Right. It's so far back, right?
The field box, I'd love to see what the view of the game is like that.
That would be cool because you're on the level of the field.
On the level of it,
right? Like that's
no doubt about it.
I'm
but
down
like
with
if you're on the sideline, you're not seeing anything.
Yeah, Arizona thing is like elevated. And then it's like really deep back, and they've got televisions and shit. It's like, if you want to sit on a sofa and watch the game on television, just stay home.
Yeah, save your money.
I mean,
they're gonna do huge in Scottsdale though. Like that's gonna be
so true. It's
massive with folks that live in the old Scottsdale area.
Shout out Tyler Herrick. I'm sure he'll be there. Oh, that's so good.
Absolutely
so
will be.
It's so true. So, okay, to bring it back to the Packers tip, we mentioned earlier, Keisean Nixon is back, and we did get a look at those contract particulars earlier today. Pretty much as advertised and as suspected, it is a 1 year, and then the Packers will see. You know, his cap hit will jump pretty significantly in that second season. If he's obviously a boon and an asset, they'll keep him around. If not, they'll probably move along. But, man, I'm fascinated to see how the rest of this offseason shakes out as far as what they bring in at the cornerback spot, particularly at the nickel and some of the slot stuff. And if they target somebody or multiple somebodies in the draft. Because, look, I think they clearly have a plan when it comes to Keisean, right? Like, they clearly, obviously, number one, he's a great returner. He's their returner. They want him to be doing that, continue to do that. But, man, and I think Zach Cruz pointed this out really nicely on Twitter the other day, where he's like, you can look at like a handful of games and see a guy who's really struggling. You can look at another handful of games and see a guy who's, somewhat consistent and shows promise. And I wonder if some of this is them betting on Hafley and his new staff getting their hands on a guy where this is a group that, particularly their history, shows that they've done a pretty good job working with defensive backs, right? They have a defensive back specialty almost in a lot of their backgrounds. So maybe they're seeing what has been a guy who has been, inconsistent, but has certainly shown glimpses that he can, do the job, so to speak. I don't know, man. I just think, A, it's good depth, and B, I hope there's competition on the way.
Yeah, and I think there will be, right? Like, I think they're going to address it definitely in the draft. I also am fascinated what they do at the linebacker spot. Like, I would have assumed that they were trying to jump on somebody here in free agency, or at least they just try to fill the cabinet with some other options.
I just don't think the money would ever make sense for the positional value, right? Like, I know we all talk about Quay Walker being taken at 22, and now that's kind of disrupted the paradigm in Green Bay. But I think that was very player specific. If I'm looking at what Goody has done throughout most of his tenure, he has made an exception or two for guys, right? Like whether it was that pick of Quay, whether it was Jaden Reed last year. I mean, I think everyone was pretty surprised when he took Reed because we thought he fell, kind of in between the cracks of some of those thresholds.
Yep.
Well, he took a really good player, right? And so I think positionally, the Packers probably still look at, the Mike or the middle linebacker as, okay, that's not a premium position. We're definitely not going to put out a ton of, free agency capital or dollars at that position. And I think you look around the league and some of the deals that these guys got, they're not huge blockbuster deals or anything, but they're like 3-year deals and got a decent amount of chunk of change up front. And I just don't think the Packers were ever going to go that route. So now things are really picked over. And I think the draft is going to have to be the answer, unless by some kind of crazy happenstance, Brian actually picks up the phone and makes a trade, which is still a possibility, but I doubt it.
Yeah, I would doubt it. I would think their picks are being traded for picks, not players at this point, right? Like, and maybe there's somebody too that you can find on in there. They clearly think McDuffie probably can start. Like, and I think
that's wild to me though.
Yeah, and not only
good depth piece,
and not only the Walker pick, like you mentioned, I thought the bigger shock to the positional value was 5 years, $50 million to Devondre Campbell at the inside backer spot, right? Like that to me was a different level of commitment to that spot. Now, maybe that's one of the things that they're also reassessing here and say, we can back on off because that clearly was not how we
wasn't
planned.
The best use of our resources.
No.
Hey, what did you think? I haven't
How
talked
about the Niners just grabbing former Packer backers, though?
And look. There's no doubt that Oren Burks got taken advantage of in the Super Bowl. A lot of people get taken advantage of by the Chiefs, though, so I don't really hold that against him. I will say his play style, though, was so noticeably different in San Francisco than it was in Green Bay, being asked to do very different things. And I do think Devondre in San Francisco will look different right now. Hopefully he stays healthy, and that should help.
A big part of it. Yeah,
that's a huge
part of it.
But, yeah, I think he will look different. But what did you think? I haven't talked to you. What did you think of his little expose on Twitter Sunday morning? That was fun to wake up to.
Man, and I was in Vegas, so I missed most of it until yesterday.
Really?
And yeah, and then everyone's like, "Dude, that Campbell stuff was crazy."
And you're
hold on, what like
what Campbell stuff?
Hold on, let me check this thing on out. Oh, this is awesome! I just
know
started laughing throughout most of it.
It was great
because there is there was a lot of smoke there, and
yes.
I'm glad that finally we got to see a little bit of the fire.
I was gonna say a lot of smoke and a little saw some fire, definitely. And there was a reply or two that he didn't like tweet out to the general public, but he replied to people that were even a little bit more pointed. That were just like, wow, man, this dude just burning bridges on his way out the door.
And it definitely, I mean, it will come across as sour grapes, but I think for a lot of Packer fans, there's some that are saying, hey, that's what we thought.
Hey, I'm not crazy.
Hey, I'm
not insane.
I'm not nuts.
Kind of saying the same shit we've been saying for 3 years. I mean, that's the thing. When he's talking about going to Matt and saying how we got to be more aggressive, we got to play more man, etc. I kind of made this point to Tazim yesterday, though. Like, it's one thing to say all that, and yes, the defense certainly improved down the stretch at some point. You know, certainly they played better, whatever. Mm-hmm. But man, it ain't like it was just like this is what we need to do, and we did it, and we played better because.
No.
All you got to do is look at the week to week from Tampa Bay, which clearly was like the low point, right? To the Carolina game where they changed and they played more man than they had all year long. And they continuously got beat and gave up 30 points to an offense that hadn't been able to get a first down, let alone score touchdowns throughout that season. They made a quarterback who looked like an all-time bust into what looked like a superstar in the second half of that game.
Looked like CJ Stroud.
Looked at me. Looked like the quarterback they should have taken.
Yeah, looked like the guy Frank Reich wanted. Oh, did I say that out loud? Oh.
Was that a thing? I don't know, man. So the defense, it's like, yeah, Devondre, we appreciate you, buddy, but it's like, A, you're part of it, and B, it's not like that was the simple situation. It's not the simplest solution or the simple solution you kind of tried to make it out to be in that tweet. But.
Well, and that's where there's always the three sides to every story. Somewhere
as Aaron
somewhere
Jones
in the middle would be very interesting, right? Somewhere in the middle that would be very interesting. I'd like to know both.
I would like
middle stories.
I absolutely. Billy, I can't thank you enough for jumping on Carry the G Radio, the podcast this week. It's always fun to talk to you, and who knows what next week plus has in store for us to talk about. We'll be later next week because I'm going down to Orlando, Florida early in the week to visit the daughter at Disney. So I'm gonna be piloting the Millennium Falcon. I'm gonna be doing the Rise of the Resistance.
Yes,
I'm gonna be getting my Star Wars on. So
we'll
be a little
later.
Tron
too. Check out.
Oh,
Tron.
I know, right? Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
My fiance, massive Disney fan, so I've been there. Been there quite a few times. You're in for a good treat.
You know the route. Now, I've been there, but not since I was like 20. So it's been a while. It's been a long time.
It's been a while. It's a little bit different.
A little different. I was telling Madeline I was there when Star Tours opened, like the original Star Wars ride.
You know what?
That was a long ass time ago.
It's also even more dangerous with Apple Pay because it becomes even easier to tap, and you're like, wait, she's got all that money.
She's already got me on like some the photo pass thing and the wristband thing and all that.
Come on, you got to have that magic band.
However, the magic band. That's what it's called.
You better believe it. Come on now.
Of course, you know it.
I told you, I know all the lingo. I've been baptized into the Disney.
I can't. Well, after next time we talk, I'll have Star Wars stories to tell. I can't.
Good.
Wait.
I'll need the full report.
Okay, Billy. Thanks so much, man. I'll talk to you next week.
Later, brother.